as Paul was saying, I have an opportunity to travel the world the last few years, meeting with members of the Java community and the international Java community, and I actually learned of a proverb when I was last visiting Africa, which I think translates really well to how the Java community works, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And as Java was celebrating its 20-year anniversary last year, I really started thinking of that proverb and thinking about Java and what makes it so successful. And I think it really does come down to the community. And I started to think about, looking back at the history, as Java started, where it started from was the set-top boxes, but now Java is literally on automobiles, in financial systems, banking systems, e-commerce systems, and as we transition to the digital economy, Facebook is using it, Twitter's using it, Netflix is using it, Uber just announced they're transitioning off of their platform onto Java. It's literally running everywhere. So what is it that continues to drive Java as a platform to grow to having over 9 million Java developers all around the world, running on billions of devices? It continues to be the #1 choice for developers on the TIOBE index month after month. It continues to grow, still #1, and also the #1 platform for employers. So there's many things that makes Java so special. First of all and foremost, it has the technology capabilities of being scalable and secure, running all the way from the very smallest devices of Java card and embedded devices all the way up to the server side and the data center enterprise Java. But also the thing that makes Java unique is that it promises portability for developers and freedom from vendor lock-in. That compatibility is an important tenet of Java and what makes it so special. But I believe the most important thing about Java that has continued to make it #1 with both developers and employers is the fact that Java is developed collaboratively with the community, with you, the Java developers. That is something that is unique to Java, that no other platform or technology has developed the way that Java has done over the last 20 years. So Paul shared a little bit about me. This is me. I'm Heather VanCura, director of the JCP Program office. I work at Oracle, and I've been working with the Java community for the last 16 years. And the community really is the reason why I've continued to stay in this role for 16 years, which is, as you know, working in the technology industry, a very, very long time. I am originally from San Diego, so I'm happy to be in my first San Diego Java user group visit. Believe it or not, after 16 years and being originally from San Diego, I've never been here to the San Diego JUG, so thanks for having me. And as you yes, so yeah, I'm currently in the Bay Area. I travel quite a bit. I like to do lots of activities. I'm always up for trying new fitness activities, so hopefully we'll get some in tomorrow before I go back to the Bay Area. So I'll tell you a little bit about how the Java community process works. That's the first part of the presentation. So who knows what the Java community process is? Just show of hands real quick. Okay. Probably you've heard of it, but you don't really know too much about it. So that's my primary focus is the Java community process. So basically the Java community process, we develop everything in the JavaX namespace. So we define it there with the community. I developed this 15 years icon now almost a year and a half ago, so close to 17 years now that we started that. So basically we have grown over the last 17 years to have 12,000 users and 2,500 expert group members. From 800 member organizations. We have Java user groups who are participating in the JCP, which Paul mentioned. We'll talk about how you can get involved as a Java user group. We have an executive committee, and JSRs are the primary focus of the JCP. We now have over 375 JSRs developed through the JCP. So who are the members? We have members everywhere in every continent of the world. So we have corporations corporations. So if your company wants to be a member of the JCP, you can join and participate on behalf of your corporation. We've also made it possible for open source groups to join, so people like Apache, Eclipse. Java user groups can join, and individual Java developers. So if you don't participate through your company, you're free to join as an individual Java developer, and I'll tell you more about how you can do that. So the executive committee, this is the executive committee. We meet every month, 4 times a year in person. And the executive committee is open for all JCP members to vote in the annual election. So once a year we hold our annual elections. This is the board of directors for the JCP, and the EC votes on all of the JSRs that are developed through the JCP. And they also look at the governance. So the JSR 364 that Paul mentioned earlier, that's a JSR that is developed to oversee evolutionary change in the JCP and the structure of it and how the Java standards are defined. So the executive committee serves as the expert group for that. So I was the spec lead for the latest evolutionary JSR, and these folks here in the picture were my expert group. So I like to say it's diverse, not necessarily, from a male-female perspective, but we have corporations, nonprofit groups. We have 2 Java user groups and a couple of individuals there. So we've got, and on the vendor side too, with the corporations, we've got a couple of financial institutions like Goldman Sachs and Credit Suisse. We have some end users like Twitter, and then we also have, some of the embedded devices, like you can see the Freescale sign in the background. So Freescale on the embedded side and ARM as well, and then some of the server side vendors like IBM and Red Hat and HP and Fujitsu. So we get together and meet and talk about, how can we respond to the needs of the community as things have changed over time and continue to evolve to meet the needs of the developers and continue to be relevant and innovate and take the feedback that we receive on an ongoing basis from the community. So this is the way we're structured. As I mentioned, anyone can be a member of the JCP. It's free to join. But the executive committee is kind of like the board of directors that I show there. I'm running the program office in the green box. And then all of the members are eligible to serve on expert groups of JSRs. That's what I have shown in the center of the slide there. So JSRs are led by spec leads, and spec leads are JCP members. So they submit an idea for a standard, something to be standardized within the Java namespace. And they draw from the JCP membership to make up an expert group. So that's, pictured sitting around the table. So the experts serve as the committee to help the spec lead deliver on the final implementation of the specification. And the spec lead at expert groups works with the Java community overall. So anyone, even if you're not a member of the JCP, actually has an opportunity to contribute to the work of the JSRs and the expert groups, to provide your comments and your feedback. Because really, as the JCP started, the reason why the JCP was started was really, it was a formalization of the informal process that was started when Java was created in 1995. It was started with an informal feedback mechanism that James Gosling had always had as a goal, was to create Java as a working developer's language to solve real-world problems. And we did have an informal mechanism for consulting with developers on the technology and sharing with them, but it wasn't until a few years after the initial launch of Java in 1995 that we actually formalized it in the JCP. But that was the goal when we created the JCP, was to have the Java developer community be able to give the feedback to the people who were actually developing the specification. And then over time, it evolved so that not only Sun would lead the specifications, but that anyone could actually lead the specifications. So it's been an evolution over time from the very beginning. But this is where it is now, and you are welcome to participate and give feedback on JSRs. Later in my presentation, I'm going to show you some of the ones that are currently open and are the ones that are open for your feedback now, that you can give and influence your opinion about. So as I mentioned, JSRs are really the primary core work of the JCP. So you've probably heard mentioned JSR this or JSR that in your work as a Java developer. So a JSR is a single version of a specification. It stands for Java Specification Request. And we have JSRs for each of the 3 platforms, as well as for standalone things that aren't targeted for part of a platform release. The JSRs are led by a spec lead, and then the day-to-day work is done with the expert group. And we deliver at the end of the process for every JSR, not only the specification, which is standard for most standards organizations in technology, but the JCP is a little bit unique in that we also ask the expert group to deliver a reference implementation and a test suite. So those 3 things work together for the technology to make sure that it's easy for developers to understand. So the specification is telling us whether or not we can build an implementation. So your reference implementation is basically the proof of concept for the specification. And the TCK is how we tell if the reference implementation is conforming. And in addition, the TCK serves the purpose of testing against independent implementations. So JSRs in the JCP are allowed to have multiple compatible implementations of each specification. That's why we have this diverse, broad ecosystem in the Java community that creates so much choice for developers and for vendors and for customers, is the fact that you can have multiple compatible implementations of a single standard, and they will all pass the same compatibility kit. That's the TCK. So all 3 of these things work together. Although it's not always necessary to use the reference implementation, it's necessary for the JSR to be considered final and complete that evolutionary process through the JCP. So the development cycle is that process. Every JSR that's developed through the JCP and every standard and everything in the Java X namespace follows this same cycle, having 3 open review periods, and that's the time when you're welcome to provide your comments. So it's a formal review period, and then at that time, the executive committee or board of directors votes on the JSR. So every JSR has 3 open review periods, 3 times that the executive committee votes on it. And every JSR follows that same life cycle. So how can you get involved? So you can do things, sometimes it's easier if you have some concrete suggestions. So say that there's a JSR you're interested in getting involved in. Some of the things that you can do is comment on the list. So every JSR has a public issue tracker and a public discussion list. You're welcome to provide feedback on that mailing list and issue tracker. You can read the early versions of the spec as well as the Java docs. And as the JSR gets further along, you'll see early builds of the reference implementation, which you're welcome to download and try out. You can either report bugs on that implementation, or you can try to create your own sample applications if you'd like to. One of the other things that is really simple, a little bit easier to do, is just write or speak about the technology in your local Java user group. So I hear you don't have a speaker for next month. You could actually take a look at one of these JSRs, read the specification, and come and present what you found out here at the user group. So you're sharing that knowledge and kind of bridging the gap between when the technology, how it's being developed now, but when it comes out into the marketplace, you'll actually be further along and ready, and you may even collect some comments that you could then feed on to the expert group and the spec lead. Also, you can evangelize the technology, so talk about the fact that you're reading and commenting on this spec. That actually creates some awareness around the fact that this is being developed. Provide your insight in it. You can do that on Twitter. Most of the Java community and spec leads actually are very active on Twitter through a blog or lightning talks at other conferences that you may attend. Some people comment on the lack of documentation on JSRs. You're also welcome to help out with that documentation. So those are just some ideas to get you started. It really is up to you what you want to get involved in and participate in, but those are some of the suggestions that I give to people who ask, yeah, that sounds really cool that Java's developed collaboratively with the community, but what can I actually do? So a few suggestions for you there. So as I said, what we do really is primarily JSRs, Java Specification Request Development, so developing the technology, but how we do it is through working with open standards and open source. So these things are complementary. Sometimes people are a bit perplexed when I say this. So standards and open source, they actually can work together. Open source is an important requirement from the developer community, and the JCP has evolved over time to embrace open source since it wasn't so commonplace when Java was first introduced in 1995. But standards continue to be important. As we like to call it in the JCP, we call it a co-opetition. So together in the JCP, we agree on what we want to standardize on and what we have commonality and agreement on, and then we compete on the implementation. So as I was talking about the compatibility of the implementations. So that makes it easier to implement the standards, and it's easier for developers to understand the technology when it's done in the open. And that results in more implementations, a broader ecosystem, and again, greater adoption of the standard, being able to have access into that development as it's being developed before it's actually finalized and released to the market. And as we've seen over time, as we've seen the advent of open source, it used to be that we would start with the specification and the standardization and then get experience and develop the code and the reference implementation after the spec and the standardization. But really we've seen that more shifting to where we're encouraging people to actually develop the technology first in an open source method. So get that experience in the community in an open source way, and then come to the JCP and standardize it. So that's kind of reversed over time over the last 15 years, where we're seeing now that really you should have the experience in open source projects and communities, and when you're ready and you can come to an agreement, you bring it to the JCP to create a standard. So we're not necessarily innovating in the JCP. The innovation is happening outside of the JCP and then coming together and agreeing on the spec and the standardization later. So putting this into practice, what does this look like? So what are the open source implementations? So as I mentioned, the platforms are developed through the JCP. So we have 2 reference implementations, open source projects that serve as the reference implementations for the JSRs that are the platforms. So for Java SE, the open source project that is the reference implementation for that platform is project the OpenJDK, which you've probably heard of. Has anybody heard of OpenJDK? And on the EE side, Java EE, the reference implementation is Project Glassfish. Anybody heard of Glassfish? Yeah. Did anybody know that already? That these were the reference implementations for the JSRs, these projects? Kind of, yeah. So you guys, you know more about the JCP than you thought, you see. All right. So basically that's where the reference implementation is developed, and that's one of the deliverables out of the JCP. So the reference implementation is done there through an open source method, and that really has become the norm and has been highly encouraged through the JCP, that the implementation is developed in an open source project. So why would you want to participate in this? And I have this one from 2 points. So this first one is, as an individual developer, why would you want to devote your own personal time to get involved and participate in this and do some of these tasks that I had laid out before in terms of downloading the spec, downloading the early access builds of the reference implementation, providing comments and feedback on your mailing list? Well, first of all, you're going to gain some advanced knowledge of what's coming in Java, so you're going to find out about it before most of your peers. You're going to gain some skills. So if you do take the opportunity to actually put together a few comments, you'll have an opportunity to interact with the user group and with also the expert group of the JSR. So you're going to be developing those skills that not every developer has the opportunity to develop in terms of communication, collaboration. Sometimes, you might work more with a local team, so you're going to be able to work across the globe with the expert group members. And those are some important skills that employers these days are really looking for in terms of their developers. You can always find a developer who has better technical skills, but really what you really need in order to deliver on your software development projects is developers who have those type of communication skills and collaboration skills that can work together with a team with someone who doesn't necessarily share their point of view. You're going to gain some visibility, not only in your local market, if you come here and speak, for instance, at your user group, but also across the world in the broader developer community. You're doing something that's going to be making the technology better, so not only is that going to make your job easier, but it's also going to make everyone else's job easier across the Java community, and you're going to be having fun doing it. I can tell you from the hack days and user group meetings that I've been to around the world, people are actually having a lot of fun going ahead and getting involved with the specification efforts. They're getting together, they're sharing and learning together, helping each other and learning together. And you can also participate as a corporation. So if you want to have your company get involved with the JCP, some of the reasons that corporate JCP members have shared with me is that it's enabled them to put their requirements into the standardization process, as well as adapt to the changes in the market before they're actually coming, and also developing new markets for them. So, and oftentimes they're able to develop their internal implementation right alongside the development of the spec as it's developing through the JCP. And oftentimes corporations are using this as an opportunity to grow their developers. So serving on an expert group can oftentimes be a significant benefit to the developers for the reason I just mentioned on the previous screen, which is they're growing their reputation, their network, their skill set, they're getting worldwide visibility, they're becoming an expert in their field. So oftentimes corporations are using this as a benefit to help retain and attract developers to their company, especially if it's a consulting company. So we actually have, I was going to ask Teresa to come up since she's our sponsor tonight. Tommy Tribe is actually a member of the JCP. Maybe share a couple points about why you joined. And
so
you can come up. You can come up.
Do you guys know what Tommy is? Catch it, Tommy? So it's Tomcat. That's web profile certified. So that's how we're involved with the Java EE. Tommy Tribe joined the JCP because just like the open source project, we want to have an influence in the direction that technology grows in. Our customers are always, looking for new things, better things, and when we create products and services, we want to be ahead of that. So we joined the JCP so we can have an impact and influence people in that way. And from a corporate perspective, my developers, a lot of them, we encourage them to do public speaking, join the expert group, and it elevates the company profile quite a bit, because when people are looking at you, they just don't want another consulting company with developers. They want somebody who's actually involved in the community, who has a say on the spec, and who has a drive to make things, to drive the specs forward. So from a vendor perspective, there's a lot of good reasons why you should join the JCP.
All right. Take advantage of having Teresa here. So it's great to have people join the JCP. We've got all different types of companies, consultants, as well as vendors. So take a look. Come talk to me during the break. Maybe we're gonna take a break soon. First, I'll tell you about a little bit of the history. So as you know, I was at Sun, so I started at Sun in 2000. Been working on Java since the 1.2 release. But in 2011, Oracle actually acquired Sun, so that's how I came to be an employee of Oracle. But fortunately, I continued to work on the JCP, and at that time of the acquisition, really, Java was stagnating a little bit, so there hadn't been any releases from Sun for close to 5 years. So at that time, it really kind of was refreshing to get this investment from Oracle. So what we did was we worked on 3 things. So new revisions of each of the 3 platforms, JCP.Next reforms, so that's what I was talking about with JSR 364, so evolving the JCP to meet the needs of the developers. So that was a 3-part process. And also looking at ways that we could really embrace the community. So even though it was possible for people to participate in the JCP when we launched it in 1999, really looking at ways that we could motivate and incentivize Java user groups to participate. So the first thing we did was we looked at releasing 3 major releases of the platforms. We did that through the JSR. So with May 2013, we had the release of Java EE 7. So that was a significant upgrade to Java EE. So we had 3 new technologies going into Java EE. The batch applications API, as well as an Java API for JSON and an API for Java WebSocket. So those were 3 new technologies that went into Java EE. And oftentimes when I come to Java user groups, people say they're not using Java EE, which is why I have this slide. Just, you might not be using all of Java EE, but you're probably using at least one of these components of Java EE. So things like Java Server Bases, Java Server Pages, CDI, EJB, Managed Java Beans, JAX-RS. So that's Jersey is the reference implementation. Anybody using any of these things in production? Yeah, many of you are. So That was released in 2013, so many people are just now starting to adopt Java EE because many of the implementations are just coming out over the last year, so that is continuing to happen, but already also work has started on Java EE 8. Next was the Java ME 8 update, which was a significant update since we hadn't had any releases in the ME space for over 5 years. And this really was a focus on the Java virtual machine. So this is for embedded devices, a smaller footprint for those, as well as the introduction of a Java ME embedded profile. So that was something new that we had never had before. So that's out there, released in April 2014. And some of the things that the executive committee is talking about are other things that could be standardized in addition to that. So kind of a shift away from that feature phones type of market and more on the Internet of Things embedded space. So there potentially could be more to come in that area, but that was introduced in April 2014. And we also had the update of Java SE. So Java SE 8, which was a significant update to Java SE, probably I would say for sure the most significant update to Java SE ever, maybe even the most significant update to any language ever, just in terms of the new features that were introduced with lambdas, new streams API, new date and time API, annotations, as you can see in this slide, many, many, many things. But highly anticipated features from the Java developer community, and I would say the most quickly and widely adopted release ever in Java's history, and massive adoption, really because of the technology, but also coming back to what I said earlier in the presentation, with Java 8 we truly did incorporate the community into the testing of Java 8, so we eliminated some of those problems that we had with the Java 7 release where things weren't working in the beginning after the release. So we made a true effort to really engage the community before Java 8 was released and have people testing their open source projects, testing their code, and report to us what was working and what wasn't. So I think that truly was a big part of the success of that release and the rapid adoption of it. And we are already starting to work on the Java 9 release, so JDK 9, and I'll tell you about that later in my presentation, how you can get involved in that. But the goal really is to make it even more successful than the Java 8 release, and really to get even more developers involved in testing their code early on in the process. So now we're looking for Java 9. We still have at least 6 months to go. So lots of time still for you to get involved. So that was the first part. So as I said, over the last 5 years, we really, focused on getting out the technology first and foremost. That was key for developers to continue to make Java choice number 1, which it was, despite the fact that there weren't any releases coming out. Again, it was really the community that was keeping Java alive during that time. So the next thing that we started working on was the JCP Next effort. That's what we started calling it. So that was a way to look at how we could actually change the governance of the JCP. Because, development needs and practices change over time. And one of the things that we started to look out first was the fact that when the JCP was first started, we actually limited who could have access into the work of the expert groups to only members of the JCP. So that created a little bit of a smoke-filled room environment, thus the visual of a smoke-filled room. So we really wanted to open that up and make it more similar to what happens in open source communities. So open everything up and have the open issue trackers, the open public discussion forums, and have the reference implementations really developed out in the open without having passwords or memberships required to download the drafts of the JSR as it was developed through the JCP. So that was the first thing that we did. And then we also looked at kind of the overall oversight with the executive committees. We used to have 2 executive committees, and over time we found it just really didn't make sense to have separate executive committees. Really, Java was merging more so that there wasn't as much of a distinction between the platforms. It really made more sense and to streamline it and make one executive committee. So we merged those 2 executive committees down into one. So that's what we currently have today, is one executive committee that oversees all of the Java technologies developed through the JCP and also works with the developer community to evolve the JCP governance itself. And then the next thing that we did was JSR 364. So this is the JSR that we just finished earlier this year, and that was broadening JCP membership. That's the one that I served as the expert JSR spec lead for and formed the expert group. And really that came out of the fact that we wanted to broaden the membership. So we had opened everything up so everything's transparent and people can participate and comment and view everything that's going on, but still we found that we weren't seeing that significant participation in the JCP. So we wanted to look at the barriers that were there still preventing people from actually participating in the JCP. So what we decided to do was introduce some new membership levels to streamline things, and we created 3 different levels of membership, which I'll tell you a little bit about next. We eliminated all of the membership fees, so for some small companies that did prove to be a barrier. It was a small fee of $5,000 a year, but several of smaller companies said that was actually prohibiting them from joining, so we decided to eliminate all of the fees. We used to actually also have a downloadable PDF to join the JCP, and we decided to implement electronic signatures. So again, evolving with the times, that's really more of the commonplace expectation these days, that you would sign an agreement electronically, not have to print it out and mail it in or scan it or fax it or however you want to get it in. We added contributors for JSR expert groups, so if you are going to go ahead and take that step to comment on the JSRs, you actually have an opportunity to be recognized for that contribution. And added some seats on the executive committee for those types of people that are making more simple contributions, like feedback on the mailing list, bug fixes, comments, and the issue tracker. So again, our goal was really to encourage more individuals and also user groups to participate in the JCP, but still ensure that we have appropriate IP commitments from all the members. So we introduced a new membership level for individuals, which is closer to a one-page agreement, and we call that an associate membership. And so that's just as a comparison, if you've never looked at the membership agreement for the JCP, the membership agreement is about 11 pages, plus or minus 1 or 2, might be 13, I'm not sure. So this agreement is a one-page agreement. So new associate membership class for individuals, 1 page, so much simpler. The previous agreement, if you were an individual, we actually asked you to have your employer sign that. If you weren't going to participate as a part of your employer, we asked your employer to sign that. We took away that requirement for associate members. And we allow associate members to be formally recognized on the JSR. So again, as Teresa mentioned, the developers really enjoy that recognition in the community, that they're participating as an expert. So we're still giving them that public recognition for the work that they're giving to the community. We also created a membership class for Java user groups, and we call that a partner membership. And again, many Java user groups found that an 11 to 12 page agreement did not make sense for them, because just like you, they're more of a meetup group. You're on a Yahoo site, maybe you'll transition to a meetup group. Most of the Java user groups are just a meetup group. They're using meetup.com. They're not an official nonprofit. It doesn't really make sense for them to be signing a legal agreement that most of it doesn't pertain to them. So we created this partner membership really specifically for Java user groups. Similar 1 page agreement, electronically signed, and Java user groups can sign up to be supporters of JSR. So we as a user group support this effort and would be interested in supporting it and helping out in any way that we can. So we took out the fee, and we completed this in April, and already we're creating many new members. I definitely still want to accept more new members, so if you're interested, talk to me during the break. But again, just to summarize, three levels of membership. So we still have the full membership, that would be the original membership. So you serve on the expert groups, lead JSRs, and you can also serve and vote for the executive committee members. But now we also have associate membership for individuals, so you can serve as a contributor on a JSR and also vote in the annual executive committee elections. And then we have the partner membership, which is designed specifically for Java user groups, but also other nonprofit organizations that want to join. And they can serve on the executive committee as well. So we do, as I mentioned earlier, have a couple of user groups who are serving on the executive committee. They will still be able to serve in that capacity and vote as well on the executive committee elections. So every fall we have elections to see who's going to be current members of the JCP. So those are our 3 memberships. It's easy to join. You can do it all online and electronically and no fees. So I just broke it down here by individuals. I think I've covered most of this, but I go into a little bit more detail here, and then we'll take a break, I think, after this point. I think that would be good breaking points. Individuals, no lawyers, no employer signature. You can still join as a full member if you're an individual, but if you are employed, you are still going to be required to get your employer to sign the exhibit that we have. So you can choose if you're an individual. So it used to be, individual, you either participate as a full member as part of your company, or you join in their full right and you get your employer to sign. Again, that was a barrier for many individuals, getting their employer to sign. So we actually create this option for associate membership, but you still can join as a full member if you want to. It's just that you will have to go and get your employer to sign and give their permission that you're going ahead and doing this, and it's not on their behalf. And that would be the full JSPA, which is the 12-ish page document. Java user groups. We used to have Java user groups sign the JSPA, but now, unless you're a certified nonprofit, which we ask you to certify as yourself that you're a nonprofit, so groups like SoJava in Brazil, London Java Community, they're actually certified nonprofits. They can accept money. They're different countries have different things that they call that. In the U.S., we call it a 501c. But in other countries, they call it different things. But if you are a legal entity, Java user groups can join as a full member. But otherwise, really makes sense to join as a partner member. And organizations can still join as a full member, and it's now free. Its fees are permanently waived, and any member of the organization can actually participate as part of that membership. So people sign up on jcp.org, and it goes through a process of certifying that person actually is an employee of the organization with the primary contact, and then they're free to serve on expert groups of any JSR and represent the company, which is a member of the JCP. For instance, like Teresa's Tommy Tribe, so any of the developers on Tommy Tribe could nominate themselves to serve on an expert group, and they would just need to go through our online process of the primary contact, verifying, yes, this developer works for me, and I approve them to participate in this process. So that's the way that works. As I mentioned, it is done all online and almost instantly within the day, so that's cool. You don't have to print out any physical documents. We have some charts on the website if you're confused about this, where you can go through and see all the different benefits, as well as this little handy flowchart that Goldman Sachs developed for me, which I highly appreciate since this is not my particular skill. But if you want to go and follow the flowchart in any particular situations, like for instance, if you're a professor, sometimes it becomes a little tricky, so we have a few little different options for you there, and as well as the privileges that you get with each level of membership. So if you can serve on an executive committee, if you can serve on an expert group, if you can be a contributor, if you can be an expert group member, if you can be a specification lead. So that's all under our membership page. You can find all those tools there. And we are having our membership drive now because we will have our elections coming up in November. So we'll be opening up actually nominations for executive committee seats in September. So if you are interested in voting or serving on the executive committee in the coming year, this would be the perfect time for you to join. So I would think that we'll take a break here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the openness, and then the Adopt-a-JSR program that you mentioned earlier, Paul, and how you can get involved and what some of the options are for some of the JSRs that are being developed now. So some of the Java EE JSRs that are being submitted and worked on, as well as the Java SE9 JSRs. So those are really the primary things that are being developed through the JCP now, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about those after the break. How long will it take for the break? 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's take 10 minutes, so 8 o'clock.
Okay, 8 o'clock. And then if you want to ask questions about joining, this would be a great time.
The restrooms are in the midsection there. We still have some more pizza and alcohol.